How is this not all collapsing? How is everyone not running around like, oh my gosh, we're all mortal, everyone I love is gonna die? Hello, welcome. In this video, we're gonna talk about existential crises and what you can do to get through them. If you don't know what an existential crisis is, lucky you, I have been through two. It's sort of a sense of disintegration and like suddenly that the world doesn't make sense and you start contemplating existence and afterlife and like spirituality and death and what does it all mean and a bunch of anxiety to go along with it. That's my experience of existential crises. We're going to talk a bit about them today. I remember going through this stuff and feeling really alone and separate, and I think that's part of the whole experience, but I just hope this can maybe speak to someone because it's like a video that I would have wanted to see. We're going to start off by looking at what is agreed to be a pretty accurate depiction of an existential crisis. It's the painting The Scream by Edvard Munch. It was painted in, I've got my notes here, 1893. Munch defined how we see our own age, racked with anxiety and uncertainty, based on Munch's actual experience of a scream piercing through nature while on a walk after his two companions, seen in the background, had left him. The painting is about how man is a part of nature and absorption into such a totality liquidates the individual. That's big talk. I'm basically going to talk about that a bit, about nature and the power of nature, and actually how it was quite a healing thing for me. The scream could be interpreted as expressing the agony of the obliteration of human personality. I think this is just a really good visualization of what an existential crisis feels like. If we're going to talk quickly about my experience, just because this might chime with you if you're actually going through this, the first time I went through this was when I was 19, and I remember just distinctly it suddenly felt like I was falling down a well or falling just into darkness, and there was nothing I could do to stop it, and I was like falling into this chasm. It was a really, really scary, encroaching, horrible feeling, and I felt so bad that the only way out of it would be to, you know, not be here anymore. This is the way I was thinking at the time. So it was very terrifying because I was like, I don't want to be alive anymore because this feeling is awful, but I also don't really have a choice because the only other choice is to not be alive anymore, and that's just bringing forward what I'm scared of and bringing forward the inevitable. This is very intense. It was almost like a spiritual collapse. I grew up with religion. Up to that point, I'd never really had to deal with the idea of death being like final and absolute. I mean, it obviously is, but if you grow up within a religious context, there's the idea of an afterlife and how death, yes, is the end of your physical being, but you continue on spiritually. Contemplating death in its absolute totality was terrifying, and it was also at this time in my life that I was diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder, which I do not have anymore. That's the self-diagnosis. I'm saying I don't have it anymore, but no, I definitely don't have it to the extent I had it then. It was awful. Every waking second was just like horrific, unbearable. It was really difficult. The only things that I found helped me, and you will resonate with this if you're currently going through the same thing, I found that walking helped me a lot, and movement just in general, like sitting in one place was not helpful for me. The other thing that really helped was being outside at night and seeing the stars. I'm going to talk about this a bit more later on, but that was a really healing thing. I also remember at this time being terrified of sleeping. I would use ice cubes to keep myself awake. I remember going to my cousin's wedding. It was a really happy occasion. I'm so happy for her. I love my family, but I was just racked by this anxiety. It was a weekend away, the wedding. It made the whole thing very surreal for me because I was not sleeping and I was kind of like all over the place. At this point, my drinking hadn't really taken off. I'm an alcoholic, I talk about that in some of my other videos, but at this point it was really just like sober me feeling the weight of the world, and it was awful. That was my first experience with an existential crisis. I had another one in 2021 in March. This definitely, I think, was brought on by alcohol because I was drinking very heavily at that point in time. It could even have been like a withdrawal event because it was awful. The similar feelings to what I've said I already went through before, just this kind of spiritual collapse and really just terror, basically, existential terror, existential dread. Again, the only thing I found that helped me really was walking. I was doing like 16,000 steps a day just because I found it was the only thing that was helpful was moving. And again, looking at the stars was another thing that I found comfort in. I remember going at this time on Quora and Reddit and looking up like existential crisis and reading about like thanatophobia, and I was just like, oh great, other people have this, but also like, oh no, there's no getting around this. And I remember reading overwhelmingly what people said was you just need time. If you're going through an existential crisis, you just need time. Time will give you perspective. But whenever you're in it, and you will know if you're in it, it's like time is both your enemy and it's also like non-existent, and you feel so tiny in comparison to the world, and you feel like pointless, but you also feel super special. It's very strange, and the last thing you want someone to say is like, oh, it'll just get better with time. You're like, ah! I currently can't get through 1 second without crying, and you're telling me that it'll just get better with time. As someone who's come out the other side, yes, it will get better with time. I didn't feel like I had time. Like, I remember sitting at the dinner table with my family and just like breaking down crying and feeling such an intense feeling of separation and isolation and just being by myself, and they didn't get it, and them seeing me crying being like, oh, she's really going through something, and I'm like, you don't get it, we're all gonna die and it's all pointless. Laughing about it now, but it was really intense and really horrible. I was literally like, at that point I didn't really believe in God, or I'd sort of fallen away and been like, what is all of this? I remember distinctly getting down on my knees and praying and being like, God, I can't deal with this feeling anymore. I just feel awful. What is the point? If you're real, please, like, I can't deal with life anymore. I have this existential fear, this existential dread. Awful stuff. My mum was sleeping in my bed with me because I was just like, it felt like I was on the edge of reality. It was really horrible. I remember at that point in time we were studying Gerard Manley Hopkins. If you've not read some of his poetry, you're missing a treat. It was not really conducive to me feeling better at this point in time. I've got some of his poems written out here. Not live this tormented mind with this tormented mind tormenting yet. I cast for comfort I can no more get. No worse there is none, pitched past pitch of grief. Comforter where is your comforting? Mary, mother of us, where is your relief? Here, creep, wretch, under a comfort serves in the whirlwind. All life, death does end, and each day dies with sleep. I mean, on the one hand, that's actually quite a good thing to be studying when you're going through an existential crisis. It was verbalizing my experience, but on the other hand, I was like, oh great, this guy wrote this in 18 whatever, and now he's dead, and he was thinking the same things, and then I'm gonna die. Like, it was just both a good thing and probably the most unhelpful thing I could have studied. So we've talked so far about how it feels to go through an existential crisis and how isolating, how separate you feel living in that constant state of dread. So what can you do? We've mentioned time, and I hate to say it again because you're probably like, ah! But time will help you. You will get more perspective. You will come out of this. This is very intense. Your body can't sustain this for a long amount of time. It will feel like a long time, but you're probably only going to be in this heightened state for, I don't know, a week. Mine, I think the second time around was only 5 or 6 days, and then I started to feel more normal. The first time it happened, I wasn't sleeping, so that was obviously making the time go on longer, and I was sleeping. I couldn't not sleep, but I was doing everything in my power to not sleep, and I was trying to avoid sleep because I was afraid, you know, thanatophobia. But basically, you know, I said I looked on Reddit, I looked on Quora, I looked online for these answers, and these people on Quora saying you just need time. They were right. I did just need time. I do feel better now. I thought I would never get out of that. I feel better now. It's all about stacking up the days and putting more time between you and what happened. And I think this goes for everything, anything bad that you've been through, but particularly for an existential crisis. I found that time is the greatest healer. And I know it doesn't feel like it now if you're stuck in your existential crisis, drowning in existentialism, but what you're going through now will give you a sense of perspective when you come out, that yes, it will feel quite isolating and you'll feel quite separate, but it will also feel quite healing. One of the ways that you can accelerate that feeling of healing, the feeling of healing, one of the ways you can accelerate that, I found, was going into nature. So yes, I did have a bigger drive to go for walks, to want to go outside and want to be in nature. Not only walking, but just like looking at the stars. And I'll put a clip of it here. I have this beautiful universe book, which is just full of facts about the stars and about space and constellations, and it's so interesting. I think for me, that really helped because you look at those, whenever I say look at the stars, I'm just thinking of the Coldplay song, but I would look at the stars, look how they shine for you. No, I would look at the stars and I would be like, oh, the light that I am seeing is however many millions of years old. That star could have already died and we don't know yet, just because the light is taking so long to reach us. I'm not a physicist, I'm maybe getting this completely wrong. This is my understanding of it. I took comfort in the fact that I was small. I am small and I don't really matter, and our lives don't, I don't know, I don't want to say our lives don't matter, because they do. I took comfort in the fact that there was like beauty in nature, and there was something nice about the stars just being so cold and timeless, I guess. I think Matt Haig also talks about that in Reasons to Stay Alive. I think he says something similar. So aside from time and nature, I think another thing that will help you accelerate your escape from your existential crisis would be to find some meaning and some purpose, because that will counter all of the existential dread that you're feeling, because you'll be like, oh, but I do have a purpose, or I do have meaning in my life. So for instance, me, I've started this YouTube channel. It brings me a tremendous amount of joy and it's a great creative outlet, but it also helps me find meaning and gives me a purpose, because I want to create videos that help people, hopefully. And this week on my channel I am doing a daily video challenge. I'm posting every day, so please feel free to subscribe and follow along. But I would also say, as a recovering alcoholic, being sober gives me a tremendous amount of purpose, and being in recovery gives me purpose. I'm part of a fellowship, and one of the things they actually say is that our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. That's my purpose. That's my primary purpose. Every day when I wake up, I need to stay sober and I need to support other alcoholics. Hopefully as well, if you are an alcoholic watching this, you feel like this is a safe space. That's what I'm trying to create. The other thing in terms of purpose and sobriety and recovery is that you also are encouraged to use your life as an example for others and to give others hope. It's about getting out of yourself. If we're going to talk about alcoholism for a sec, self-centered, it's all about self. It's self-will run riot is what alcoholism is. So it's about getting outside of yourself and helping other people. For instance, the step 3 prayer, which you pray to God or a higher power, you know, a God of your understanding. You say, God, relieve me of the bondage of self so I may better do your will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I might help of your power, your love, and your way of life. It's about using your life as an example, asking for all of your difficulties to be removed. Take away my difficulties so that victory over them can bear witness to the power that sobriety and that recovery has worked in my life, and yes, God as well too. But we're talking about making a difference, and that gives me a tremendous amount of purpose. Stay sober, help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. Use your life as an example to show that sobriety works, recovery is possible for you. I will leave some links about this in the description below if you want to check them out. So we've just talked about the step 3 prayer, but I think getting spiritual can also be a way out of your existential crisis, aside from, as we said, finding purpose, finding meaning. Getting spiritual, and this was, as I said, I got down on my knees and I prayed in the middle of my existential crisis, and I had not, you know, at that point I didn't really believe in God. There was something in me that was like, I can't do this anymore. Like, this void that I'm contemplating is terrifying and I need God. And you might be like, well, that's a defense mechanism, or what's the quote? Religion is the opiate of the masses. I could do a whole other video on why that is not necessarily a bad thing. If you would like that, please comment below. Don't know if it's really dicey to get into religion as an institution as opposed to just like spirituality. I feel alright talking about spirituality because there are different traditions and stuff, but it's really your interpretation of it. But when I was trying to get to grips with all of these big things in my existential crisis a couple years ago in March, yeah, it's coming up to a couple years ago. Wow, time flies. See, time goes. It gives you perspective. I remember feeling not only a desire to pray and be like, God help me, but also a desire to read about other people's spiritual experiences. And I love reading anyway, and reading is definitely an escape for me. But even so, in this stage of my life, I was reading some really good books. I was kind of just like clinging onto these books because they were giving me hope. I read Jackie Pullinger's Chasing the Dragon, which is an astonishing book. Run Baby Run by Nikki Cruz. Again, that book is so powerful. I could do a video just on that book. It's amazing. It really helped me because he is talking about bigger spiritual issues and about God and about finding meaning, about really changing your life. Linked to that, I guess, is also The Cross and the Switchblade by David Wilkerson. You can read Run Baby Run and The Cross and the Switchblade. They're 2 parts of the same story, which is quite interesting. So I will leave links to those books if you want to check them out because they are amazing. But I found that reading, especially engaging spiritually, really helped me accelerate the process of coming out of my existential crisis because it gave me some perspective. Just so much to think about. I love reading these books. I love reading fiction. I love reading self-help books. I love reading spiritual books. I just love books. Books were a lifeline for me. I was reading these stories, staying up late, you know, because I didn't want to go to sleep because I was scared of everything, losing myself in this story and in the hope and in like the just miraculousness of the experiences that they describe in this book. Really recommend you check them out because I remember looking at the world at that point and being like, how is this not all collapsing? How is everyone not running around crazy like, oh my gosh, we're all mortal, everyone I love is gonna die? How is everyone not dealing with this at the moment? And now I'm out of that state, that very heightened existential state, and I can see the difference in the way that I view things, and it is kind of not sustainable, and you do slip back into that state of denial and just, oh yeah, it's all like, this is all gonna, I'm not gonna get into it. It's not, I can't be in that state, and I'm grateful for that. We've talked about a lot. There are no answers, are there, to these big existential, spiritual issues, which on the one hand is cool because you get to explore all of the different options. There's no definitive answer. You can look into so much and read widely and draw from your own experiences, but on the other hand, it would be quite nice just to have an answer, wouldn't it? A definitive answer. And if you're someone like me who thinks a lot about this sort of stuff, that is gonna be challenging because every now and then you are gonna dip into the insanity where you see behind the curtain and you're just like, what are we doing? What is all of this? Life, existence, what is it? I would say another book said life. I was like, life, the universe, everything. Reading The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, I read the whole series again when I was going through this existential moment, because that book, that series is just wonderful, and the audiobooks as well, so good. I listen to them a lot. There are loads of books and resources out there that will help you if you're going through an existential crisis, but I just thought maybe I should make a video on it because it's something I have been through, and I wanted to share my experience and give you some hope that you will get through it and it does get better and you will be able to function again, and you will emerge with a more nuanced perspective and a greater appreciation for everything, as I said, as I did. So I hope this has given you some things to think about. Please let me know your thoughts in the comments below, as always. And yes, I did mention I'm doing my daily video challenge, so thank you very much for watching, and I will see you tomorrow, or I will see you in the next one. God bless.